We've got a problem in Scotland. The fertility rate is 1.39 children per woman, far, far below the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman. That's what you need to sustain the population. Scotland's fertility rate is by quite some margin the lowest in the UK, and this just reflects a worldwide issue, a worldwide problem. In fact, fertility rates are generally tumbling across the world. So how come the Scottish population isn't declining really quickly? Well, there are various other factors as well that affect population. For example, people tending to live longer. But the outlook for the Scottish population is it's going to contract at a fairly rapid rate in the future unless something is done about it. Well, who cares, you might say? Well, we all should care, because the way our society is structured is we rely on future generations, their income, their taxation, to pay the pensions, the health care, the social care, public services, etc. for retired people. Now you may think, but hang on, everyone pays national insurance through their lifetime. Surely the government's got its head screwed on. What they'd do, they would take that money that someone's paid in, they would then save that money, and then that money would be available to pay for these services for that generation. But sadly, the government hasn't been doing that for decades and decades. And if you were to run your personal finances the way the government organises things, UK, Scottish government, then you'd be seen to be utterly irresponsible. If you said, I'm not going to save for a pension, I'm just going to spend everything, then assume that there's going to be some new income available when it comes for time for my retirement. But that's the situation we're in. I suppose ultimately you've got to blame the electorate. People have kept voting for parties that have implemented this policy. So that's the problem. What are the solutions? Well, the SNP's got some solutions. Its number one solution is like eternal mass immigration. Okay, immigration, fine, but can that really be the long-term solution to this? Just have ever more and more and more immigration? Really, I don't think that is a long-term solution. Another solution they've proposed is providing fertility treatments, IVF, etc., for single women. So in other words, deliberately producing fatherless children. Now, it's well known that fatherless children tend to have various negative outcomes through their life, very serious negative outcomes. But the SNP's attitude is produce the fatherless children, then we'll provide more support in school, more mental health services, more police, whatever, to deal with the problems that result in it. So in addition to these worse outcomes, just these children will experience a sense of emotional dislocation as well, a yearning for a father figure, and that's something that often comes out in the statements from such children, donor-conceived children, as they enter into their teenage years and into adulthood. The SNP doesn't care about that at all. They don't care about the children. The SNP care about adult desires. If there's single women who want a child, we want to make that possible. And they care about the government objectives. We want more people. And then bottom of the list, they're not really so bothered about what children need. So how about our solutions to this population problem? Looming population crisis, even. Well, number one, abortion is a massive issue. The number of abortions in Scotland more than bridges the gap between the number of births and the number of deaths. So restricting abortion would result obviously in more children being born. I think if abortion was restricted, people would be more careful and there would be less people with unwanted pregnancies, but still it would be a step towards increasing the number of births. Right, number two, it's generally shown in research around the world, I haven't seen any for Scotland, I don't know if it exists, but around the world, generally, families report that they would have liked to have had more children than they actually ended up having. And there's various reasons for that. Sometimes it's the burden of childcare. One aspect of that could be sometimes the mum, for example, it could be the dad, or it would be more usually the mum would like to be at home with the kids, but that's not really an option because the finances are too tight. So if that could be eased, maybe more people would have children. I mean, just in general, we'd want measures to support family finances. By family here, I'm meaning households bringing up children. So council tax relief. Okay, where's the money going to come from? It's not going to come from thin air. We're not like the other parties. We don't just make up things as though, money grows on trees. There would need to be adjustments. Maybe some people would have to pay a bit more. Families with dependent children would pay a little bit less. If you think about it, in the future, the families who are raising the next generation, they're effectively providing the tax income that's going to look after everyone in the future. So out of current generations, current adult generations, those that have children are providing for everyone. Those who don't have children, for whatever reason, maybe they chose not to, they weren't able to, whatever, it doesn't matter what the reason is, but the fact remains that they will be supported in retirement by the children that have been brought up by other people. So it's only fair that those people bringing up the children should be subsidised in that. So for example, in France, you get an extra half a tax allowance for every dependent child in the household. That's quite different from the almost uniquely anti-family UK and Scottish tax system. I mean, other factors. Having a big car for a big family is expensive. These are environmental regulations, results in them being quite costly. You need a bigger house for a bigger family. So we need to provide family homes that are affordable to people, because sometimes that's the reason why people don't have more children, because they can't afford a suitable home. When I say a family home, I mean probably with a garden, etc. Now it's interesting in America, there's a very strong correlation, a negative correlation, between the cost of land and the fertility rate in states in the United States of America. So where land's cheaper, where you can buy yourself a plot of land, build yourself a big house more cheaply, people have more children by quite a significant margin. So that's the sort of issue that also needs to be looked at in Scotland. Right, number 3. We'd want to change in culture, to create a culture that values parenthood. Now in the Scottish Parliament, for example, what do they do for Mother's Day? Zero. They wouldn't dream of it, of having anything to celebrate Mother's Day. But International Women's Day, which is all about glorifying career and basically anything that women do apart from being a mother. And then there's also the idea, particularly from the sort of hard left of politics, that motherhood's like a cross between prison and slavery. Women need to be liberated from it. Or the message that kids are just a nuisance, and what all mums want, all families want, is just for someone else to look after them. Whereas we want to, okay, celebrate all these other things, that's fine, but let's also celebrate parenthood, motherhood and fatherhood. I mean, a Father's Day debate in the Parliament, I mean, just imagine that. I mean, that would just be unthinkable at the moment. But why not? We need to honour fatherhood. We need to put over the message that fatherhood is a responsibility and it's a vital role in society. The SNP says it's not. The SNP said children don't need fathers. A woman can have a child on her own, and that's absolutely fine. Father, completely unnecessary. That's what the SNP says. We want to give the opposite message and try and give the message that we value parenthood, mothers and fathers. There's also been the message that having less children or no children at all is good for the environment. But the world population is going to peak before too long, and it's then going to decline fairly dramatically by a lot of projections. So I don't really need to be concerned about that. Another factor in the culture of parenthood, the culture that tends to lead to higher fertility, is religion. Now, it's not the government's job to encourage religious belief, but if they want to increase their fertility rate, they certainly shouldn't be doing anything that discourages religious belief. I mean, the final thing, this is not a policy, this is just a fact to mention, it tends to be that people with more socially conservative views, the sort of views that might be represented by the Scottish Family Party, for example, have more children. And the more you go towards the progressive end of the spectrum, like look at, say, the Scottish Green Party, they tend to have a lot less children. So the political drift of our society is also going to be contributing to a reduction in the fertility rate. Right, number 4. Something else I think that deters people from having children is they think it looks really stressful because the concept of parental or adult authority over children has been eroded. So I think people see other people with their children and they think it looks really stressful. The kids seem a real handful, they're out of control, it looks an absolute nightmare, and they think, no thanks, I don't really want to do that. Whereas if parents were happy with their children, it was more harmonious and orderly and under control, people might look at those families and think, oh, that looks really nice having children. That looks a lot of fun. That would be great. That's something we'll think about too. Right, factor number 5. Marriage. We promote marriage. Statistics from various countries, it's absolutely clear. Couples who get married are more likely to have children. It's obvious why, isn't it? If you're in the context where there's this total, permanent commitment, then that's the context where people are more likely to say, this is the right time to have children. Couples who are not married, well, it seems a bit more uncertain what happens if we split up. Maybe this is a bit risky. So promoting marriage promotes fertility. So yet again, the Scottish Government wants to increase the fertility rate, but it ignores the obvious means to do it. Right, number 6. This is not Scottish Family Party policy, but I'll just mention it because it's quite interesting. In some countries, Hungary, for example, they introduce basically bonuses for people who have big families. So in Hungary, if a woman has 4 children, then basically she doesn't pay any tax for the rest of her life, whatever she does. I think it's in Georgia, the leader of the Orthodox Church there said he would baptize the 4th child of any family. And apparently that's made quite a difference to their previously very, very low fertility rate. It's encouraged families to have more children. So there's all sorts of other creative things that could be looked at. The Scottish Family Party doesn't have any definite policy proposals in this area, but we'd be open to seeing what would be reasonable and what might work. So all these measures to increase fertility, do they work? Well, there's been a lot of research around the world into this, because a lot of governments have tried to implement this type of policy. Well, the first thing I could say is where governments have policies to try to reduce the fertility rate, they most definitely do work quite effectively and quite quickly. But on the other hand, when governments try and have policies to increase the fertility rate, well, that seems a much tougher call. And it's a long-term project and progress tends to be slow. But looking at the situation we're in, we've got to start, and this needs to be something that's looked at seriously. And where governments do stick to fertility promoting policies over a long period of time, then indeed the fruit is apparent. So there's no time to lose. Let's get started. And the way we can start this process of increasing the fertility rate in Scotland is by voting for the Scottish Family Party.